Eventually, however, he got in trouble. And it started with a Wall Street Journal story. And that was
1961.
I was going to say 69 was the first Wall Street Journal story.
Okay.
But then...
That was San Diego bicentennial that year.
Oh, okay. Well,
interesting.
Yeah.
And you missed one other element, which is that he was a buddy of Richard Nixon's and helped him get elected as president in 1968. He was one of his main backers, and perhaps that the Wall Street Journal got the two linked together. So I don't know how they would have learned about Arnholt Smith.
Yeah.
But politics and the business started coming together, and he was tripped up by both, really.
Yes, he probably became much more in the public eye because of Nixon. But one of the funny stories that now we were mentioning Nixon is back in, I think it was I don't know what year it was now, but it was when Eisenhower came to town. Maybe it was in the late 50s. Mm-hmm. They were having dinner at the El Cortez Hotel. And Eisenhower said something like, "Is this the best you have?" I don't know how shabby it was. I don't know. I always thought it was a nice hotel. But he didn't like it. He said, "This is the best you have?" And it embarrassed Smith. He said, "Well, we have the Hotel Del, but not in San Diego proper." So he eventually got the idea of building his own hotel, which is now the Westgate Hotel on 2nd Avenue between Broadway and C. And I was very impressed with the Westgate Hotel when I first came to San Diego, because the town wasn't built up the way it is now, and it was a beautiful hotel inside. His wife, I'm not sure which wife this was, let's see.
It was the second wife.
The second wife had gone to Europe and gotten all this sculpture and these paintings and the draperies. Everything was first class in the hotel. I still think it is, but the hotel has been dwarfed by all the other high-rises in downtown. It looks like a little, no one ever knows about it. Hardly anybody knows about it.
Well, it was part of the story about that, as you said, is that San Diego needed the U.S. Grand Hotel was not in very good shape. El Cortez was not very impressive, but the Westgate was built just in time for the Republican National Convention coming in 1972 and opened the year before.
Yeah.
So Smith, being a Republican, a Nixon backer, I think was instrumental in getting the Republicans to plan their convention in San Diego. And those of our listeners, viewers might not know that San Diego lost the convention at the last minute because of another scandal not involving Smith, having to do with the funding of the convention.
Right.
And but going back, you can continue with his financial woes because they're very complicated.
Yeah, and I think Roger and I both have kind of backed off of this a little bit. We've read the story, we've read what he says in his defense, and one of the charges against him was that he was loaning money to the subsidiaries of his holding company. He set up a holding company with his wife and his daughter, and maybe his mother. Maybe it was just his daughter and his mother. I can't remember now. And this holding company held all these, the Westgate Tuna, the Padres, the Yellow Cab. They had all these subsidiaries. And apparently the rule was you could only loan a certain percentage of the money's bank to any one company. And so the charges against him were that he was loaning way too much money. And he said, no, each one of these companies is separate. And he said his lawyer backed him up on this, and the comptroller backed him up on this. It is an interesting defense. And who knows, maybe the rules weren't quite as strict when he started out, so he was quite willing to go with the way things were done in the past. Anyway, he does get prosecuted by the local DA, and he makes the charge in the story that the local DA was from the other side,
a Democrat.
A Democrat. Smith had supported a guy named Bob Thomas who ran against Miller, and Bob Thomas lost and Miller won. Miller was supported by these two bankers, Richard Silverman and Bob Peterson, who had this Southern California First National Bank, and they supported Miller, and Miller won. And so, was it a partisan-driven prosecution? It's hard to say. Interesting side note to the reader. Well, in the early days of the Reader, at the very beginning, I went after all possible advertisers, including Smith, and I have a letter from Smith, who didn't ever advertise with us, but Peterson and Silverman did. They were very big supporters of the Reader in the early days. I didn't have a lot of contact with them except initially, but they were billed as the Young Turks. They were, the new bank owners who were going to change the politics of the town and so on. So it's possible part of the prosecution was motivated by that. But anyway, they did convict Smith on, I think they called it theft or embezzlement. And there were other charges of
tax fraud too.
Well, there were tax fraud, but he got, on appeal, those were reduced to misdemeanors.